Class, this is a pivotal week for our semester in terms of doing a really good job with the first essay project, which will really set the stage for doing well on the second and the third and the fourth essay projects. There are a couple of things that I want to cover with a little bit of detail here. I want to first just say thank you so much. We're a month into the semester now, and I want to thank everybody for their hard work so far and also for all the questions that they've shared with me. You know, you guys have done a great job being engaged, and that's so tough, especially when we're doing virtual instruction. And I appreciate all the hard work and effort that you've put in. Our assignments to complete for this week: finish up our first unit, our first essay project, the learning essay. And then we want to get started with essay number 2, which is an analysis essay. I'm not going to talk about that much in this video right here. I am just going to mention that briefly. You might also notice some of the pacing is adjusted for this week. The learning essay is really the most important issue, the most important thing that we've got to get done, and we want to get it done right. So I've moved back the midweek deadline from Wednesday night to Thursday night. I'm hopeful that that extra day will be useful for you if you need it. Our task for this week that I'm going to go over here in just a minute is to go over the rubric, and I'm going to do that in kind of a workshop style, meaning that I'm going to talk for a moment, then I'm going to pause. To keep this video very short, I'm going to tell you when I'm going to pause, then I'll pause for a second, and then I'll keep going. So that if you want to, you can pause the video, take a look at your essay as I direct you to, based on the topics that we're going over on that slide, and then you can resume after you've checked through. I'll also talk a little bit about formatting review, which we've just not had a good opportunity to talk about yet. Then I'll give some final tips for revision and editing for this Thursday's deadline. One thing I wanted to point out to you guys is that on Blackboard in the Learning Essay folder, there is a Learning Essay rubric. You probably know all about rubrics, but a rubric is just something that I use to kind of remind myself what the levels of criteria are, how you do the best that you possibly can on this essay. Well, it's got to contain all the right pieces in the right categories. For this first essay, I basically have 4 major categories that I look at your paper using. And then, as you can tell probably from the color coding, the green column over on the left, that's an essay that's doing everything really, really well. That's going to get full points in a given category. And then yellow is a little bit less. It's still good, but not as good. Orange is what I consider to be a little bit more limited. And then red is poor, maybe unacceptable. And as you can see on this slide right now, the first category that I always look at when I'm reviewing someone's essay is just the purpose. Is it fulfilling the purpose of the essay? And how is the thesis statement? Because that's usually directly tied to the purpose. Those are important things to keep in mind, the purpose and the thesis. You want to make sure, and I encourage you to have your essay out, whatever stage it's in. It's probably still just a rough draft right now, and that's okay. But take a look at it, and as I'm talking about it, kind of check over, make sure that your paper is doing this. And if it's not, make some notes to get it fixed, or maybe make some notes to reach out to me and ask me any questions and see if there's anything I can do to help. I'd be glad to. But first and foremost, we need to make sure that the purpose is all right, that the essay focuses on an important topic related to your education, explaining the personal experiences, a main point that would be useful for readers to consider. In other words, you're talking about why you decided to go to college. Along the same lines, the thesis has to contain, in one sentence, it needs to contain the main point of the essay, clearly mention a claim about going to college, the reasons, and preview the essay. If you do those things, you'll probably get full or mostly full points in this category. Now, if you're missing 1 or 2 of those things, if your paper kind of wanders off topic a little bit, or maybe it doesn't have as good a personal story as it could, or maybe there's a mistake or 2 in writing the thesis statement, it might go down to the next level. Or if it's got even more problems, like there isn't a very clear thesis, maybe it's hard to find, it'll go down even further and further still. So I encourage you, before we do anything else, take a look at your paper and just kind of check and see that you have these things, that you're fulfilling the purpose and that you have a thesis. And if you're unsure about it, make a note. And then after this is all over, you can shoot me an email or something like that. So I'm going to say right now, pause. The next category has to do with support. This is a huge, very important piece of this particular essay. It's true for most essays, but this one is just so vital to make sure that the support is very compelling and interesting. And I've broken it down into kind of like 4 different pieces. I hope that that's helpful and not overwhelming. In every essay, you have to use evidence. And like we talked about last week with the drafting, it comes down to personal stories. So I'll be checking to see that you, the author, are using interesting and specific personal stories as your evidence. And then storytelling elements, description and narration and reflection, things that help make it clear what's happening and how this relates to the topic's point. And that'll also be really useful for helping you to satisfy the required word count. And of course, as you're doing that, you're connecting it back using analysis and logic to show how it relates to the main idea, in this case, why come to college. Then also remember this is something that's easy to forget, but I want to remind you about it here. You need to have a quotation from either Douglas's Learning to Read or from another source. It's your choice, but it needs to be integrated into the essay in an effective way and then cited so that it provides additional context, or maybe it helps support something that you've done. Maybe it's something similar to what Douglas did. Maybe you found an article online that suggests something that's very similar to what you did. And then if you kind of go down the rubric into the yellow, orange, and red, you'll see kind of how it just degrades. Maybe there's something that's really generic or vague or unclear. That might mean that it goes down from full points to kind of like lesser points. Maybe it ends up being really short. Maybe there's a quotation, but it might have some errors in how it's cited or integrated. Any of these things might bring it down from excellent to good. And then if it's even more so, if it's even shorter, or if it's even unclear, or if the quotation is not included, it'll go down to limited, or it might go down even to poor. So I encourage you to just kind of take a quick look over your essay and then look to see that you've got those personal stories, that you're at the 800 word count requirement, that you have the quotation. Let's take a pause. Our third category in the rubric is organization. Organization can be challenging, and this is something that frequently students get a couple of points off here and there for in the first essay. That's okay, we'll keep working on it. But I wanted to go over it here. There are kind of 3 major categories that I look at within the organization topic. Overall, we want to make sure that there's that structure there, meaning that your thesis statement has these really good, clear, compelling topics that connect to topic sentences in your body paragraphs, which clearly preview the contents of each paragraph. We've talked about that in previous videos and classes and things like that. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky, but your best way to check is just to look at your thesis statement, which should be the last sentence of your introduction, and look at the first sentence of each body paragraph. Is there a connection in phrasing or in the topic that you're talking about? If so, you're probably golden. If not, you might need to add in a new topic sentence or change some words around, something like that. Flow, that usually comes down to transitions. You need to have transitional phrases at the beginning of each paragraph showing a connection to what you were just talking about. And then you have to have transitions within the body paragraphs. Those are usually done for a paper like this in terms of, time. So you might be talking about a story that happened one day and then you say the next day. That's a transition. It tells us that we're shifting topics. Transition between paragraphs might be a little bit more elaborate, but like, for example, talking about all of the great, lessons I've learned in classes, and then I want to talk about maturity. I might say some sort of transitional phrase at the beginning of my second body paragraph or second section, something like, not only did I learn a lot in class, I learned a lot about myself and how to mature. That's a little transitional phrase. That's connecting what I was just talking about with what I'm going to talk about. And then as I lump in the introduction and conclusion pieces in this section here, because this really sets the tone and wraps everything up, which is really critical for organizational purposes. Now, how might you lose points? Well, if you don't have clear topic sentences, or if they don't clearly connect to the thesis statement, you'll lose points. If you miss a couple of transitional phrases at the beginning of paragraphs or in the paragraphs, you'll lose points. And then you'll lose a lot of points if there's no introduction or no conclusion, or maybe an introduction or conclusion that's only, like a sentence or two. Those pieces don't have to be super long, but they should be included, and they should be included pretty clearly. So take just a minute to look over these things: the overall structure, the flow with transitions, and then to make sure that you do have an introduction and conclusion. I'm going to go ahead and say pause. Finally, our last section is about correctness and style. And if we're looking for a perfect paper in terms of correctness and style, major errors, there will be none. Major errors are things like just incomplete sentences or something that I just can't even understand. We're talking comma splices, run-on sentences, major errors. Things are just really tough to follow. I have to reread it several times to even know what the sentence is about. And then we want to keep the small errors, missing commas, typos, things like that. Keep those to a minimum as well. And then formatting, we'll talk about formatting in just a second, but we want to make sure that there's a title, page numbers, a 4-part heading, works cited, the correct font and correct spacing and all that kind of stuff. As far as losing points in this category, it kind of comes down to numbers. So if you just make a couple of these mistakes, you'll probably get like full points or pretty close to full points for that. But if it becomes pretty repetitive, major errors or at least a few smaller mistakes that kind of persist throughout the paper, it might go down to the good category. And then if it seems like there are a lot of errors in every paragraph or most paragraphs, it'll go down to the limited category. And then, if there's very little proofreading that it's evident, it might be poor, lose most of the points. So that's something where you just got to look over it over and over again, get help from the Writing Center. I'm not even going to pause on that one because that's something that, you really can't do workshop style. That's just something that you need to know. Now, as far as the learning essays rubric kind of wrap up is just a few key reminders. Remember that the thesis statement should be one sentence, should be the last sentence of your introduction, and it should match the topics and stories you tell in your body paragraphs. It has to match up. Remember that stories are the key here. Support should be based on stories, not generic advice. I can Google search articles all over the internet and find plenty of generic articles written by colleges saying why it's a good idea to come to college. But I want to know what your story is. Topic sentences and transitions, you just got to have them. My first reason I decided to come to college was, my second reason I went to college was, those are perfectly fine, reasonable, transitional topic sentences. And then don't forget the small stuff, editing, formatting. There's a little bit of help for you on the Blackboard site here. There's a section of the site called Formatting Help, which has a bunch of videos that will help you get your formatting for your essay right. And I really want you to do that. We don't talk about it too much in class just because there's not a lot of time to, but it's really, really important. So remember, a 4-part header, which should have your name, my name, the class, and the date. There should be a title, which is descriptive and unique. You do not need a title page. Just make sure that you don't have something that's like learning essay. Come up with something a little bit more interesting than that. You need page numbers in the top right-hand side, double spacing, Times New Roman font, 12-point size, and a works cited page on the last page. Of course, there's a sample MLA formatted essay in our textbook, the VU Writer's Handbook, on page 447. The Writing Center is also available to help. You can go in person to the Humanities Building, E229. Plenty of English professors and tutors, and there are not that many people showing up right now, so you could really get some good help. I've got the hours there. It's 8 to 11, then they go on lunch break, and then it's 12 to 5. You can also sign up virtually for a tutoring appointment, and there are a lot of directions for that on Blackboard. You can sign up for 15-minute blocks. With the limited amount of time that we have left, my recommendation to you is to follow the sequence that I have up here. The main thing that I want to just convey to you guys is just how important it is to take a look at your paper, get the rough draft all done like we talked about last week with Anne Lamont's shitty first drafts, and then just kind of go through things in stages. Get some help if you need to, Writing Center, get help from me at office hours, then take a break. Even if it's just for an hour, but ideally it would be a little bit longer, like a day or something like that, but it's whatever you can spare. Then do a second review. Writing Center can help with that as well. Take another break if possible. Give yourself as much time to go through these steps, and it will pay off. For the analysis essay, I just want to give you a little heads up on this. You're going to pick a text from Reading the World and analyze it to figure out if it's good. A lot of times people say that writing is good just because they like it, but that's not actually analysis. We're going to do analysis. So the schedule is up here. The bottom line is, after the learning essay is finished, read the directions, watch the video, and start reading Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail, which we'll use for practice. And that's all I've got for you guys. Reach out with any questions. You can email me at mnorman@binu.edu. You can come by during the office hours at the usual times. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay warm, and stay as positive as possible. I'll talk to you guys next week.